hits keep coming for Donald Trump today. The Trump Organization has agreed to dissolve its charity, the Trump Foundation, which is currently under investigation by the New York Attorney General, Barbara Underwood. She writes in a statement, quote, "Our petition detailed a shocking pattern of illegality involving the Trump Foundation, including unlawful coordination with the Trump presidential campaign, repeated and willful self-dealing, and much more. This amounted to the Trump Foundation functioning as little more than a checkbook to serve Mr. Trump's business and political interests." David Fahrenthold of the Washington Post gives us a picture of how the foundation was run, writing this, quote, "The Attorney General's investigation turned up evidence that Donald Trump Jr., Eric Trump, and Ivanka Trump, all listed as officers of the charity, had never held a board meeting. The board hasn't met since 1999. The charity's official treasurer, Trump Organization executive Alan Weisselberg, told investigators that he wasn't aware that he was even on the board." Joyce, Frank, and the panel are still here. I want to get from you guys first.
First, let's explain to people, explain what a foundation is. It's very easy to say, oh, they set this up. This is not their money. They take money from other people, just like Bill Gates gives Warren Buffett gives his money to Bill Gates to invest for him. So this is other people's money that thinks is going to real charities. So beyond the illegality of this, think about the moral reprehensibility of taking money that's meant for children to pay off his own lawsuits for his campaign. I have from my sources that they have him dead to rights on this. They have the president, that this is, and I said this last week on the show, it's going to be this and Trump.org. But and another little personal thing, just to see what he was doing with this charity money. Our kids went to the same school. Barron went to the same school as my daughter. I'm on the board of that school. And I don't even know this now. He had donated to a very wealthy Upper West Side private school $50,000 from the Trump Foundation. Think about that. That's money that's meant to on behalf
of veterans, to help sick kids.
Yeah, that's not his money. By the way, you assume when you get that, okay, that's from his family office. So out of all the acts, do you remember Madoff, how terrible he was? But then when you found out he was stealing from charities, the disgustingness of this beyond the illegality, you have to kind of pause for a second because we get so normalized and so desensitized to what this guy does. This will give you a clue of what the entire organization is all about.
And it's a good point because people donate to charity from all incomes, and to take, for someone like Donald Trump with plenty of means, to take donations.
Oh, and by the way, he's known in New York as the only rich guy that never donates his own money.
Well, let me press you one more time.
That's been his reputation long before he was
president. Are you surprised that he turned the foundation, a charity, into a criminal enterprise?
You know what? Absolutely not. He operates, and you have to understand how this guy operates, as if so detached from reality, that's such hubris that
this is legality that he's detached from now.
That's what I'm saying. Just like, oh yeah, why not? Like there's the pause, the mental pause we go through. Either is something illegal, is something wrong? That doesn't happen.
He'll have time to think about that someday, I'm sure. Joining us now from the Washington Post, David Fahrenthold. He's done extensive and fantastic reporting on the Trump Foundation. Take us through what you had the first story up, and you've got great reporting on this. Take us through what you're reporting today.
Well, so the New York Attorney General, when she sued Trump and his family over what she called persistently illegal conduct at the foundation, she asked for three things. She asked for Trump to pay millions of dollars in restitution and penalties. She asked for him to be banned from serving on the board of any New York charity for 10 years. And sort of the least consequential ask was to shut down the Trump Foundation. I say least consequential because Trump already wanted to do it. So this is the easiest part of settling that case for Trump. He's now agreed to shut down the foundation under court supervision. So he'll give away the remaining money, which is about $1.7 million, to charities that the court and the New York Attorney General approve. So he's beginning the process of ending that foundation. But the lawsuit against him and the possible millions of dollars in penalties, that still goes on.
And does anyone face any legal exposure for fraud, for defrauding its donors?
Well, the case we know about now is this New York AG lawsuit, and that's a civil lawsuit. The New York Attorney General is limited by law into sort of what kind of cases she can bring. She felt like she didn't have the legal ability to bring a criminal case, even if she wanted to in this case. The legal authority to bring a criminal case would come from the IRS or the FEC, or possibly the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance. We don't know what any one of those three agencies are doing because they don't comment on ongoing investigations, but they've been told, they've been referred by the AG of New York that they should look into it.
David, a name in your story jumped out at me, having covered last week's Cohen sentence, or was that this week? These are dog years, I can't remember. But Alan Weisselberg controls a lot of the purse strings in Trump's orbit. He didn't, incredible piece of reporting on your part. He didn't even know he was on the board, but he's listed as being on the board. He also has some limited immunity for his role in cooperating with the Southern District of New York in sort of explaining or fleshing out some of their narrow questions, as I understand it, around the hush money payment operation run by Michael Cohen and Donald Trump. How important, how does Alan Weisselberg figure into this case?
In this case, he actually talked to the New York Attorney General's investigators. He was deposed. He provided evidence, I think, separate and apart from whatever immunity he might have gotten in the federal prosecution of Michael Cohen. And Weisselberg actually was a really helpful witness for the New York Attorney General. He told them, as you said, that he was not aware that he was on the board, the charity's board. He told them that Ivanka, Donald Jr., and Eric, who were supposed to be on the board of directors for this charity, looking out for its interests, making sure its money wasn't misused, the board hadn't met since 1999, so they were certainly not doing that job. He knew all about how the money was being spent. He told the New York AG, look, you asked me what the policies are, what our policies are to make sure we aren't misspending charity money. There are no policies.
So I guess my question for you, David, is the president tweets every day, goes absolutely bananas that Michael Cohen was cooperating with Mueller and with the SDNY. It goes berserk over the Flynn sentencing. Do you think he had any idea of what you just explained, that Alan Weisselberg, the guy who knows where all the bodies are buried, was extremely helpful to this investigation where the president has no immunity, has no ability to pardon himself or his children, who seem very central to this case?
He probably was aware of it in June when the New York Attorney General made public its findings, which quoted from Alan Weisselberg. Alan Weisselberg is still at the Trump Organization. I saw some company filings from a few weeks ago that he was signing as a CFO and EVP. So he's still there. It doesn't seem to be on the outs the way that Michael Cohen is. And then again, Michael Cohen has implicated Trump in some possibly criminal matters, and this is just a civil matter.
Here's where it gets criminal. If any of that money, and I believe you'll find out, did go directly to the campaign, then you have more campaign finance violations.
That's in the case, that there was illegal coordination with the presidential.
That's where it gets criminal.
Lemire.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is it's yet another front. That's just it too. It's there's 6 or 7 entities connected to the president right now, whether it's his inaugural committee, to the campaign, to the administration, to the foundation, all of the organization itself, the business. They're all being scrutinized by investigators where there's mounting legal pressure, and it's against a president who has a thinly staffed legal team, has a White House that is ill prepared for this. The new counsel has just come in there. There's no real war room. That's not even mentioning the Democrats taking control of the House. So it seems like every day the pressure is ratcheting up in the West Wing as each investigation, in multiple different parts, there seems to be a new development that is adding to strain on the of despair among people around him, not knowing what's next.
Why is Weisselberg still there? Because this is the 26th floor again and again. That's where President Trump worked for decades in Trump Tower. Him at the center, the children in one office doing certain projects, Alan Weisselberg in another. He knows Weisselberg has always been functioning as someone who has to act extemporaneous, often react to what the Trump family is doing. That's why he always manages everything he does. It's how people talk about what's going on inside of the White House and inside of the president's legal team.
How long do all of the Republicans on the Hill keep saying nothing to see here? So nothing to see in the SDNY, nothing to see with the foundation, nothing to see. How long is that sustainable?
At this point, Republicans feel like they're going to wait for Robert Mueller's report, and they're going to hedge everything until then. I mean, you have them, some of them who are Trump allies, praying that there's not some kind of smoking gun of Russian collusion, because at this point they think he's the only way some of them win re-election in 2020. So they're actually not running away from Trump at this point. Where is the primary challenger for President Trump right now?
Well, where are their souls?
Yeah. I'm not a priest, Nicole.
I get the politics. I've lived the politics, but
very different. I really think that because the soul is going to be unearthed. And I think today is very different than 6 months from now. How a lot of these candidates can be looking. There was that marathon man and Laurence Olivier. Is it safe yet? Is it safe yet? They're waiting under the rocks. And pretty soon, next 3 or 4 months, I think it's going to be safe. If you go back, none of them wanted Trump initially. they're stuck with that disease now. But the second that there seems to be a cure for that disease, I think they will just run.
I think Robert's point, there is no cure. There is no cure. Your point is there is no cure. I mean, no one is even brave. You guys under investigation, as Jonathan said, 7 separate. But you're right.
You're talking about a Republican Party that doesn't exist anymore.
Exactly.
It's the Republican Party of Donald John Trump.
But if he's indicted, what do they do? Never mind.
A smart young Republican would make a bet right now and come forward. But there's not an election. There's not an election tomorrow. If I was advising somebody, because it's not tomorrow, I understand. Nobody's getting primary in the next 6 months. First one out is going to be a star in that party, because to your point, there's nowhere else to go right now.
Who has the stature? The only person who seems to have the stature is a senator-elect from Utah.
Mitt Romney.
But does the Republican base even want him right now?
Or, by the way, somebody we haven't even talked about but comes forward. A young congressman, somebody who comes, that's the opportunity. I wish I was out there.
How do you win a primary, though, Donnie?
It's a year away. And maybe they're not being primary next year. Maybe they're being primaried in 2 years. Think about where Trump was today versus 6 months ago. A year ago today, 70% of this country said the economy was was definitely going in the right direction. Now 70% say it's either going to stay the same or go in the wrong direction.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.